So this was not the only thing that has happened in Hong Kong recently.
Yeah, there's been so much. They officially passed that patriotic oath law where, if you want to be a district councilor, you have to swear an oath.
And it
loyalty.
was previously that sort of the higher ranking people in government had to do that oath.
Yes, and they did, but then remember there was a few years ago people were disqualified for not saying the oath properly enough.
Yeah.
And so this has been an issue for a long time, but with this new law, which was put in place shortly after the Communist Party basically said you're going to put this law into place, there's also ways to officially disqualify people from office. Like, you're already in office, you've already sworn the oath, but if you do something like insult the flag, you could get disqualified.
Or vague national security things.
Yeah. Remember when we were in Hong Kong and there was Hong Kongers hung up the Hong Kong flag, but instead of the normal flower, it was a bloody flower with a petals,
the Black Bohemia thing?
Black Bohemia, yeah. Bohemian. Bohemia. Did I say it right? No.
I think, yeah.
Well, it's the thing.
So any district councilor that does something with that flag would be
I don't think
in trouble.
that, yeah, I don't, not
but
that.
It's so vague. The things are national security. If you do anything to endanger national security, to promote independence, just a bunch of really
colluding
vague
with
things.
Foreign forces.
Yeah, what does that mean? Does that mean talking to a official from another country?
It could be, definitely, I think. That would definitely be one. Mm-hmm. Another one would definitely be maybe giving an interview to media from a hostile foreign force. Yeah, us. Or I'm sure they'd even find a way to, qualify to that to any Western media, right?
Possibly.
It's a feature, not a bug. To have this type of vagueness, right? In kind of communist law, they do this on purpose so that they can basically adjust that to whatever they want to accuse you of.
Is this better or worse than the days when they would just do whatever they wanted with no excuse? And now they sort of make laws to do whatever they want.
This is worse. And the reason it's worse is that when there's no laws, people from the West look at it and say, well, this is a lawless system. We can't work with them. What China has done now, what the Communist Party has done over the last few decades is they've created this framework that appears to have rule of law and contracts and courts and treaties and all this stuff. But then the Communist Party just violates it, right? Or they violate the spirit of it. And so the problem, though, is that too many people in the West from rule of law countries like the U.S. See China and say, well, okay, we can have a deal with them. We can invest in China because if there's a dispute, they have a court system. We can resolve it, right? But that's not how it actually works in practice. It's only the appearance of it. And that's because so many of us are stupid. We
guilty as charged.
Believe that somehow it's going to work. So yeah, appearance of rule of law is worse. And then they have a specific excuse each time they go after an individual.
I think, it's lawfare. It is what it is. It is the weaponization of the law. And it's not just about violating it when they want to. They're actually kind of setting this system up to justify the things that they've done. They start repressing the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, and then they slowly set up a system where now you retroactively make it legal through, different ways, legal mechanisms, things like that.
And this kind of policy extends pretty far, like the Coast Guard law that they came out with recently that basically allows, they're giving justification for the Chinese Coast Guard to essentially take over disputed territorial waters in the South China Sea.
Right, and it gives them a legal justification to open fire if they're attacked. And then what this does is because it's the Communist Party, or the Chinese government has announced that there's this new law. And so everyone else should know not to mess with them because then they'll be able to open fire according to the law. It's basically using it as an excuse, but it's an unjust law. It's a law that violates international treaties and whatnot. But that doesn't matter because the law itself has been weaponized in this way.
Well, this is part of how the Chinese Communist Party is dividing the world between, liberal democracies and the authoritarian system they want to create. Because it will get to a point where it's either like, countries will be like, okay, yeah, we agree with how China looks at international law and whatnot. And the purpose is to divide the world. Like, so the Communist Party it'll be clear which countries are on China's side and which is part of the other side.
We had a guest on last week, Tofi Seradine, who was talking about the, when Belt and Road partner countries are dealing with China, they're typically signing an agreement that says if there's a dispute, we agree that it will be resolved in a Chinese court, right? And like if those countries are stupid, which presumably they are because they've signed a Belt and Road agreement with China in the first place, if they're stupid, they think that this gives them a pathway to resolve conflicts. But in fact, there's roughly zero chance of it being resolved in their favor because it's being done in a Chinese court, and the Chinese courts are controlled by the Chinese Communist Party.
I don't know if that they think that it's going to work in their favor. I think it's probably that they had no choice.
Right. Well, the choice they should have made was to not sign a Belt and Road agreement with China. But once you've already crossed that bridge.
I mean, I tend to blame these countries less because there is often an infrastructure problem in these places, right? Where there's not really, they do not necessarily have the capacity to build the infrastructure themselves. And if they're not clear on what the Chinese Communist Party is or what they're doing, they get kind of like wooed, right?
Well, often the reason these countries don't have good infrastructure is because they're ruled by corrupt authoritarian governments, often with either communist or socialist leanings. So, if they cleaned that up, they wouldn't be in that situation where they have poor infrastructure in the first place. And you wouldn't have like these dictators who are, when faced with money from the West that requires them to reform or CCP dollars,
Look, maybe they're so beloved that they've just been elected to office, for the last 30 years straight.
People love them.
It happens. Yeah, I mean, the U.S. over the last few years has done more to build alliances with some of these developing countries and help work with them on funding. And I think that's to the U.S.'s credit because it does provide them another option that's not China. But the problem, as you point out, is like a lot of these are these dictatorships. And it's the Chinese Communist Party that specifically seeks out dictatorships to work with for the Belt and Road because it knows it's much easier because you only have to enrich a certain people, and you're much more likely to get that deal. So it's kind of like there was already a divide, right? And the CCP just went after the low-hanging fruit. I mean, there's some exceptions, right? Like Italy, Greece. It's hard to understand why those governments are.
It's pretty easy. It's because they both got in trouble with the EU because of debt problems.
Yeah, that's also true. And, and maybe a lot of the people in those two countries, for sure, a lot of people in those two countries have socialist leanings. And that leads them to kind of look at China's, socialist system as being like a really viable option.
And why not? It just came out in Chinese state-run media that 98% of people in China like what the government is doing.
Wow.
I mean, look, a U.S. president would kill for those kinds of approval ratings.
Hey, maybe they will.
You just have to eliminate more than half of the country to get it.
Yeah. I wonder about the 2%.
Well,
Yeah.
no, it's
fake.
Well, it's just like, when Xi Jinping got elected
Yeah.
by the National People's Congress, and there was one person,
One vote who voted nay.
Yeah, and it's like, okay,
Probably Xi Jinping.